The armed forces of North Korea launched a suspected short-range ballistic missile toward the sea off its east coast, a move that provoked sharp condemnation from its southern neighbor and raised fresh alarm in U.S. and regional security circles. The missile, according to the military of South Korea, was fired from an inland site near the northwestern region, close to the Chinese border, and traveled approximately 700 kilometers, 435 miles, before falling into maritime waters off the east of the peninsula. In response, South Korea's defense ministry issued a strongly worded statement on Saturday, November 8, condemning the launch and calling on Pyongyang to halt actions that escalate the already fragile inter-Korean situation. He said in their statement, the ministry stressed that it was regrettable that North Korea had also criticized the joint US-South Korea annual drills and high-level security meetings. For its part, the United States Indo-Pacific Command US Indo-PACOM stated that while the missile posed no immediate threat to the United States or its allies, the launch nonetheless highlights the destabilizing impact of Pyongyang's actions. This latest missile event comes at a moment of heightened diplomatic and military friction. Just days earlier, North Korea's defense minister, No Kwang-chol, had warned of further offensive action and criticized the US-South Korea alliance for what he called an escalating threat to the North's security. On Thursday, Pyongyang also slammed new US sanctions imposed on North Korean individuals and entities linked to cyber money laundering schemes. North Korean state media declared that Washington's sanctions and military cooperation with Seoul would not yield results, saying as long as the current US administration has expressed its stance to antagonize us to the end, we will also be patient and respond correspondingly. From the South Korean perspective, the launch is seen as not only a threat, but a deliberate provocation timed to coincide with US-South Korean defense engagements. On November 4, US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth visited Seoul for the annual security consultative meeting with his South Korean counterpart, An Gyubak. North Korea swiftly denounced that visit, accusing it of conspiring to escalate military pressure on the North. In its statement, the South Korean Defense Ministry urged Pyongyang to immediately cease all actions that heighten tensions between the two Koreas and reiterated that Seoul remains committed to readiness and close coordination with its US ally. Further complicating the backdrop is the fact that South Korea's newly inaugurated president, Lee Jae-myung, who assumed office earlier this year, has sought to pivot away from the previous administration's engagement-first strategy toward a posture that combines dialogue with stronger defense capabilities. North Korea's leadership, however, has shown little interest in renewed talks under existing conditions. Analysts say the missile launch serves several strategic purposes for Pyongyang: to demonstrate its advancing missile capabilities, to signal discontent with US-led sanctions and military cooperation in the region, and to complicate Seoul's and Washington's efforts to shape diplomatic incentives. It also underscores a pattern of escalation ahead of major regional diplomatic events and military exercises. From Washington's perspective, the incident reinforces the argument that North Korea remains a destabilizing actor, while the US military emphasized that no direct threat to the US homeland or deployed forces was identified in this launch. The statement concluded that the allies must maintain vigilance, noting that we are aware of the missile launch and are consulting closely with our allies and partners. In Seoul, defense planners are reported to be reviewing threat assessments and urging tighter surveillance and readiness across the EC corridor, including deepening trilateral intelligence sharing with Washington and Tokyo. Japan, meanwhile, confirmed it had detected the launch and that the missile likely landed outside Japan's exclusive economic zone with no reported damage. This episode comes amid a wider push by North Korea to modernize its missile and nuclear-capable arsenal. Recent displays by Pyongyang of new weapon systems, including what it says are hypersonic projectiles and a new intercontinental ballistic missile dubbed the Hwasong-20, have raised concerns among its neighbors and alliances. Equally, South Korea has accelerated efforts to bolster its own deterrence. Seoul's announcement earlier this year to deploy a so-called monster missile with much greater range and destructive potential has drawn attention in the region. Against that backdrop, this latest missile launch is likely to complicate any immediate prospects for diplomatic engagement. Pyongyang has repeatedly stated that it will not return to talks under pressure or sanctions, and that the strategic situation must be altered in its favor. Its announcement that more offensive action could follow suggests that it views missile launches as spurs to diplomacy as much as messages of defiance. South Korea's Ministry of Defense, in its Saturday statement, emphasized that dialogue is only possible when North Korea abandons activities that heighten military tensions. The ministry stressed that while Seoul remains open to engagement, it will not tolerate provocations that undermine the basis for constructive structural dialogue. Observers warn that the risks of miscalculation in the region remain elevated. The ballistic trajectory of the missile, the proximity of allied surveillance networks, and the frequency of tests by the North all increase the potential for unintended escalation, especially if such launches are misinterpreted by neighbors or draw instantaneous retaliatory steps. From a strategic viewpoint, North Korea's pattern appears increasingly to rely on calibrated provocations, launches that fall short of threatening U.S. mainland territory, but nonetheless raise regional alarms, thereby reinforcing Pyongyang's bargaining leverage while avoiding triggering full-blown allied responses. The 700 kilometers flight distance in this latest test is consistent with such a strategy, significant but contained. In the coming days, diplomats and defense officials in Seoul, Washington and Tokyo are expected to monitor whether North Korea conducts further missile tests, mobilizes additional military assets, or launches overt threats in state media. The timing of this launch, occurring as annual US-South Korea drills approach and amid intensified sanctions targeting Pyongyang's cyber and illicit financing networks, signals that the North may view this as a strategic moment to reset the terms of engagement. For South Korea and the United States, the challenge will be twofold: sustaining ready deterrence while preserving avenues for diplomatic de-escalation. The balance is delicate. For North Korea, by contrast, the calculus appears to emphasize demonstrating capability and leverage, reaffirming its nuclear weapon state status, and ensuring that any return to dialogue occurs on terms overwhelmingly favorable to Pyongyang. In sum, Friday's missile launch and Saturday's reaction illustrate the tough tactical environment on the Korean Peninsula in late 2025. A cycle of test-response rhetoric that each side must navigate carefully to avoid tipping into a broader escalation. As South Korea's defense ministry put it in its statement, we urge North Korea to immediately cease all actions that heighten tensions between the two Koreas. The coming days will tell whether this remains another episode in the ongoing standoff or turns into a broader spiral of provocation and response. For Seoul, the immediate priority will be to strengthen coordination with Washington and Tokyo while keeping diplomatic channels open to Beijing, whose influence over Pyongyang remains a key variable in containing future tests. The administration of President Lee Jae-myung has pledged to pursue what it calls firm deterrence and pragmatic dialogue, a dual-track strategy designed to prevent the North from dictating the pace of confrontation. Yet, as the cycle of launches and condemnations continues, the risk of misinterpretation and accidental escalation grows, a danger both sides acknowledge but appear unwilling to act decisively to reduce. Meanwhile, in Pyongyang, the leadership's messaging suggests that missile launches will remain a central tool of leverage in a region defined by shifting alliances and renewed military posturing. Each test, though seemingly routine, serves to remind the world of North Korea's enduring ability to unsettle the regional balance and command global attention. Whether the next move will be diplomatic or defiant depends on the willingness of all parties to move beyond rhetoric and toward a sustainable framework for stability, one that can halt this dangerous rhythm of provocation before it once again spirals out of control.